Today we are going to be reading this amazing article that I found published in the International Journal of Environmental Studies. The title is Fast Fashion Wearing Out the Planet by Ting and Stagner. So, here we go. Abstract. Living irresponsibly for today's trends will deprive us of tomorrow's future. Fast fashion is grossly wasteful, environmentally damaging, and outright unsustainable. Its negative impacts are not just the overproduction of garments. Yet slowing down fast fashion is an effort that every one of us can execute. This paper highlights the environmental, social, and economic damage fast fashion causes. Once educated, each responsible person can counter fast fashion with better quality slow fashion. Introduction. One underlying element in sustainable living is waste and energy reduction. The most effective way forward is to target something prevailing and of global scale. Such is the case for food and fashion. Sustainable food has become a pressing topic. Sustainable fashion, on the other hand, is still relatively unknown to the public. Unlike food, which every person requires daily, a set of clothing can last for years. Starting from the 1980s, the life cycle of clothing has been constantly shortening. We are using and disposing of clothing faster and faster. Fast fashion, like fast food, is addictive and disposable. Most pieces of clothing end up in a landfill or are burned. If clothing is not dumped into a landfill, it becomes part of the second-hand clothing trade. About 450,000 tons of second-hand clothes are exported from the United States every year and are received in mostly low and middle-income countries. Thus, although the West is predominantly responsible for overconsumption, fast fashion is a global issue affecting individuals worldwide, regardless of income level. Clothing that is not sold is thrown out as waste. It can be found polluting waterways and parks, especially in low and middle income countries that do not have secure waste systems. From 1994 to 2014, the production of clothing increased by 400%. 80 billion pieces are produced globally every year. Our culture of consumerism and looking for great deals, cheap clothes, are responsible for this. Overconsumption is seen across a wide range of material items in North America: shoes, fast food, electronics, home furnishings, and of course, apparel. Consumers are obsessed with getting the next thing. Through this obsession, they are constantly demanding more goods. Goods are produced according to demand. We recognize that there is a high demand for many types of material items, which leads to the issue of overproduction and unsustainability. This paper will focus on the fast fashion industry. The fashion industry as a whole contributes to substantial pollution and waste globally. Fast fashion is part of this industry. Like fast fashion itself, the term is trendy. To provide a definition, it is a fast response system that encourages disposability. Thus, the business model is designed to be unsustainable, and that is why this paper looks at the fast fashion industry specifically rather than the entire fashion industry. This is a worldwide issue, as the globalization of fast fashion has shown an increase in carbon dioxide in America, as well as lower and middle income countries, Brazil, India, and China. Although, as efficiency increases, energy usage is slowly decreasing, the environmental impacts of fast fashion on water and climate are increasing. As the demand for cheap clothing increases, the prices are low, owing to outsourcing manufacturing to low and middle income countries. Worldwide, 80 billion clothing pieces are bought new annually, which is about $1.2 trillion in sales. Most clothing pieces are made in China and Bangladesh. Best-selling fashion brands both manufacture and retail at the same time, using a short production cycle with no middleman. This allows them to move from a design to a finished product in a couple of weeks. This fast fashion model has, in turn, increased production and consumption of fashion. It is inexpensive, addictive, and of low quality. Customers are buying continuously and mindlessly. New designs are typically made bi-weekly, and what are left in stores quickly becomes out of style, out of fashion, adding to textile waste. This does not concern the businesses, as the clothes were inexpensive to produce in the first place. Fast fashion results from changes in fashion trends and cheap clothes. Unfortunately, very few consumers know about the harm the newest trends are causing to the environment. If we continue this trend, statistics show that by 2030, the climate impact of the fashion industry will double. Defining the problem. Fast fashion is clothing that is cheap and quickly made. Like all other businesses, as the global economy grows, the production of clothing has become international. The growth of textile fabrics, manufacturing of fabrics and clothing assembly take place in countries with inexpensive labor. With this shift in labor, the working conditions have been moved to these low and middle income countries as well. These harsh working conditions include environmental pollution, health hazards, and violation of human rights. On the 24th of April 2013, in Dhaka, Bangladesh, the largest garment disaster in history killed 1,127 workers when a carelessly built building, the Rana Plaza, collapsed. This disaster emphasizes that fast fashion is both an environmental and social issue. The factory owners still wanted the employees to continue working after the incident. Bangladesh can export so much clothing because of its unethically low wages. Working conditions have been an issue in global supply chains even before the tragic Rana Plaza accident. Yet even with public outcry to change the conduct of working conditions, and even with changes made, the results are insignificant. Mass production appears to sacrifice decent working conditions. Companies value profit over the well-being of the workers within the supply chain, exploiting vulnerable people. Cole and Shergolami have found that in the past 10 years, following the boom in the demand of fast fashion, clothing manufacturers had to increase supply, increasing the risk of slavery-like working conditions. In an equation, fast fashion is added production of products, subtracted prices, all multiplied by ever-changing fashion seasons, yielding an abundance of clothing materials. In business, fast fashion has been extremely successful, but it has come at the price of overconsumption and being unsustainable and unethical. Yet customers are overconsuming and liberally disposing of clothing, creating a pattern that promotes fast fashion. Because of such high demand for fast fashion, it has become competitive and cheap, outcompeting slow fashion. People are buying a higher quantity of clothing at a lower quality and doing so much more often than in the past. The United States consumes the highest amount of clothes and textiles in the world. About 85% of clothing used by Americans ends up in a landfill, 1.7 million tons annually, about 36 kilograms per individual yearly, taking up 5% of landfill area. Fast fashion requires manufacturing clothing quickly to keep up with the quick pace of changing trends. It is very common to destroy unsold clothing, but very harmful to the environment. These pieces of unsold clothing are known as dead stock. Popular fast fashion companies such as Zara, Gap, and H&M have been known to dispose of their dead stock by burning or cutting clothing to prevent others from reselling their products. Globally, about 100 billion pieces of clothing are produced each year, and 92 million tons of solid waste is produced because of overproduction. Many fashion companies continue to destroy their dead stock by slashing or burning for two main reasons. 1. There's simply too much clothing. The merchandisers inaccurately predict the amount of shopping the consumers will do. 2. Trends are constantly changing, and increase in production must be done in a short amount of time to keep up with the trends. In 2018, journalist Charles C. Argo hosted a CBC News special about new recycled clothing initiatives. Argo chatted with a staff member from the Salvation Army, a non-profit Christian organization that accepts clothing donations, showing the excess of unwanted donations. This is the model of fast fashion. We are consuming too many clothing items too quickly. Argo discovered that 85% of textiles end up in a landfill. Unfortunately, most fabrics cannot be broken down in a landfill. Clothing waste is not the only issue. The processes and practices used to manufacture fast fashion fabrics and garments are also unsustainable. Approximately 60% of clothing is made from petroleum, and 30% is made from cotton. Production of clothing fibers requires large quantities of natural resources, thus having a large impact on the environment, second to factory farming. Factories also require copious amounts of energy to keep running. To transform a ton of cotton into usable fabric, the requirement is about 65,000 kilowatt hours of electricity and more than 250,000 liters of water. About 75% of the water used in this process is used in washing, bleaching, and dyeing the fabric. As the textile industry grows, these factories are higher in the hierarchy, even higher than citizens. Water is supplied to factories before people. The growth of cotton uses the most insecticides and pesticides in the world. Many of these chemicals are harmful to both the health of the workers and the health of the environment. After being woven, the fabric is gray in color. Heat and chemicals are used to make the fabric softer and white. About 70% of fabrics are placed in bleach and acid dyes to color them. More harsh chemicals are used throughout manufacturing, dyeing, and printing. Bleaching and washing means chemicals in large amounts of water. This toxic mixture moves from the factory to the nearby bodies of water. Rivers where people once enjoyed recreation are now unrecognizable. The darkened water discouraged people from fishing or using them at all. It is no surprise that contaminated water leaving factories have a huge negative impact on the environment, causing an imbalance in ecosystems and damaging biodiversity. Cotton is not the only material that has many negative environmental impacts. The process of tanning, a method to create leather, uses an abundance of harsh chemicals to smooth out the fabric. One of the 20 chemicals used is chromium. It is inexpensive and causes skin diseases. It also enters water systems, harming the environment, ultimately ending up in the food chain. Smoke from the tanneries pollutes the air, causing illnesses such as bronchitis and cancer. Synthetic fibers such as nylon and polyester are plastics created through polymer synthesis. Many clothing items are made of synthetic fibers. About 70% of the fiber produced globally is synthetic. Chemicals that cause health and environmental issues are used in the manufacturing of synthetic fibers, polluting the air, water, soil, and wildlife, and using large amounts of energy to manufacture. The clothing cannot be recycled and is not biodegradable. Rayon is made from wood pulp and is causing deforestation. Bamboo is easy to grow but needs strong chemicals such as carbon disulfide and sodium hydroxide to be softened into fabric. Thus, bamboo is not a sustainable material for clothing, as the chemicals are absorbed into the environment, harming the residents. A common practice for developed countries is to factory produce cloth by machine, then to ship the fabric to poorer countries for workers to make the fabric into clothing. This practice comes with a host of problems. The human labor comes at a cost of low wages and inadequate work conditions. Pollution is inevitable when the clothing needs to be shipped back to developed countries. Clothing production is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions and is continuing to increase. Worldwide, 40 million people work in garment assembly, 90% in low and middle income countries. Because of political and management issues, safety is not a priority. Accordingly, hazards harm employees. Respiratory problems arise from poor ventilation. Physical injuries occur from repeated movements for long hours. Factory conditions can lead to serious ailments such as cancer and fetal damage. Death has occurred in extreme cases such as the Rana Plaza collapse, yet nothing effective is done to impose safety standards in these low and middle income countries. Bick et al. Detail the multitude of clothing issues social media have focused on. The production of fabric uses an abundance of water. Toxic dyes are released into sewage systems, and unethical working conditions at factories are just the tip of the iceberg. It is even dangerous to one's health to live near industrial fashion facilities. Sustainability efforts from companies and consumers. Shravani Magidam et al. Maintain that the global fashion industry is worth about $3,000 billion USD, making it more than 2% of the world's gross domestic product. In recent years, people have started looking into this industry for sustainable fashion. If clothing is made in a fashion that meets our environmental, social, and economic needs without hurting the future of the planet or society, it is considered sustainable. Similarly, a fiber is considered sustainable if it is created in a way that reduces pollution and the use of natural resources as much as possible. Natural celluloses and protein fibers are better for the environment and our health than synthetic fibers. Organic cotton, which is sustainable and grown without any chemicals and uses eco-dyeing, is also more environmentally friendly than non-organic cotton. Designers are using natural dyes in their clothing that are less harmful to the environment. Many businesses have policies for sustainable materials and reducing the environmental impacts of fiber production. Peter et al. Suggests eliminating the fast fashion business model in its entirety to make the necessary changes. Counter to fast fashion is slow fashion. Slow fashion does not stop clothing production, but rather slows it down, producing less quantity and more quality at a higher price point for a better product, allowing companies to pay fair wages to their workers. Fashion is an image of culture. It is important for designers to create what is marketable to stay in business. Slow fashion is arguably still profitable, but with a different business model. Slow fashion requires timeless pieces rather than trendy items and quality over quantity. Sustainable fashion depends on many factors: source of materials, values, ecosystem preservation, good working conditions, and reasonable hours and wages. Consumers must also support things that reduce the negative impact on human welfare and the environment. They can choose slow fashion, buying less, and when new clothing is purchased, it should be better quality clothing that will last longer. As well, consumers can repair their clothing or buy secondhand clothing. If one used a piece of clothing for 3 months longer than average, the carbon footprint of the item would be reduced by 5 to 10%. This point, which tallies with good habits shaped by recognizable ethics, is not the same as greenwashing. That is merely an advertising trick. It capitalizes the emotional appeal of eco-friendly practices by companies promoting their products as good for the environment without having any real standards. Consumers must be well informed. Globally, secondhand clothing is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Annually, 15% of Americans shop at consignment shops. Most people shop for the large selection of good quality clothing at a low price. With the growing concern about consumerism on our planet, secondhand clothing will probably increase in popularity. Secondhand shopping, well established for decades in regards to books, now allows shoppers to feel purposeful about buying clothes and competitive in virtue when they discuss their unique finds with their friends. When secondhand clothing finds a new home, less is sent to landfills, reducing the amount of pollution. It is common for people to acquire secondhand clothing from family and friends or through charities. New methods such as renting and swapping clothing have offered even more opportunities for people to reuse clothing. Some consumer concerns about secondhand clothing include transfer of germs, diseases, personal stains, and misfortune if a previous owner had died in a certain piece of clothing. On the other hand, some benefits of secondhand clothing include increased value from low prices of high-quality clothing, uniqueness of clothing, and the environmental value. Since the 1990s, there has been an increase in secondhand clothing being sold in the West, but most Chinese persons dislike the thought of wearing someone else's clothes. It is much less likely for young Chinese customers to buy secondhand clothing compared to young American customers. There may be a lack of a secondhand clothing industry because of cheap new clothing, prejudice against buying secondhand, and no system for making secondhand clothes available. Those who are Chinese and young who shop secondhand are showing their concerns for the environment. With China's industrialization and poor air quality, the health of the population is being threatened. Thus, a new awareness of consumption in the environment may push the secondhand clothing industry forward. Recycling fabric is a goal that many popular fashion brands are trying to tackle. A few big names that are starting recycling initiatives include H&M, Nike, Levi's, and more. Recycling aims to eliminate fashion waste, but this can only be achieved if done on a large scale. These initiatives are part of life cycle thinking about waste and help to move the industry towards a circular economy. This can be done by recycling clothing for the secondhand clothing industry, but also going farther by recovering waste fibers for reuse or recycling, or to produce energy. There is not one solution that works in all circumstances, but many adaptations will be required. This will require new ways of envisioning the life cycle of clothing. Small-scale craft businesses hold a powerful place in sustainable fashion. Sustainability is not limited to a modern minimalistic approach. India's consumers are going back to their roots, showing admiration for historical craft pieces, leading to unique clothing items, revitalizing indigenous values of wellness. India's tradition of weaving and hand-dyeing cloths is also symbolic of prosperity. We can continue these practices today in the name of slow fashion, as consumers will be more aware of slow production and consumption cycles. Sandhu recommends raising awareness by communication through social media of emotional hooks of such traditions. When designer Anita Dongre was asked to explain sustainability in Hindi, she put it simply, "That which is good for everyone." Horton details the growing popularity of sustainable fashion in popular media. A call to dress better for the planet can be seen in Lucy Siegel's book, To Die For, Is Fashion Wearing Out the Planet?, Andrew Morgan's documentary, The True Cost, and even in fashion magazines. In 2018, Vogue Australia published a piece titled, How Your Fast Fashion Habit is Ruining More Than the Earth. The sustainable fashion lifestyle has even been continuously endorsed by high-profile celebrities such as actress Emma Watson, producer Olivia Firth, and high-end designer Stella McCartney. Kent shows that how a woman dresses herself has made a statement about her lifestyle for centuries. Likewise, today, women are still dressing to say something, but the words are a little different. Young people are leading the way, as the conversation about ethical fashion is being released on video forums where young people encourage one another to shop from a place of responsibility for themselves, others, and the planet. In 2010, there were 0.97 billion social media users. That is projected to triple to 3.09 billion users in 2021. People are now informed and angry. Sustainable fashion has piqued the public's interest in the last 10 years, and the global society is reaping the benefits as a younger generation is taking the lead. As more people buy slow fashion, they are buying unique outfits that show off their personalities. McEwen and Shearer were able to conduct a study of social media's engagement through measuring the quantity of likes and comments on popular social media application Instagram. This engagement shows a positive relationship between customers and their favorite fashion brands, making customers loyal to specific brands. Their studies show that with celebrities and influencers posting sustainable fashion on social media, this is where many people are first exposed to it. They surveyed their participants before and after the study and had their participants follow actress Emma Watson's Instagram page at The Press Tour, which is dedicated to showing and detailing her sustainable outfits. Even if participants of the study had knowledge of slow fashion before the study, the use of social media positively increased their awareness of the great volume of people advocating its use. Before the study, some participants admitted their thoughts towards sustainable fashion were that it was exclusively high-end and simply not fashionable, but the exercise quickly had these participants retracting those views. Following sustainable fashion social media accounts has allowed many people to become aware of the multitude of sustainable fashion brands on the market. As social media accounts promoting sustainable fashion become more mainstream, the number of likes and comments is seen to be proportional to the growing number of users who find slow fashion appealing. A like is a useful measure of the appeal of the clothing, the education of slow fashion in the caption, and the likelihood of people revisiting these sustainable fashion posts. Salim and Aladoli have found that those with a high interest in fashion are more likely to purchase environmentally cautious items. As fashion influencers and YouTubers are taking over social media, the new generation is constantly exposed to content that promotes environmental knowledge. Brands are using environmentalism as one of their main business advertisements, as young customers who are actively practicing sustainable lifestyles are willingly paying higher prices for slow fashion. Educating people about sustainable clothing brands increases the demand for their sustainable clothing pieces. Slow fashion is empowering. The customers know they are buying ethically made clothing items, transforming into their ideal social selves. This is the persona they wish others to see through social media. Unique and compassionate. Despite the wave of fast fashion, the new generation is more cautious of its impact on the environment. Kong et al. Find that 70% of customers are more likely to buy clothing from environmentally friendly companies rather than environmentally harmful companies. Research shows that consumers are willing to pay higher prices to sleep with a clear conscience when it comes to the clothes that they buy. Slow fashion focuses on quality from the beginning of production to the end product. It includes clothing made from local manufacturers and sustainable fabrics, with a focus on the quality rather than the quantity of clothing, which leads to longer production times. Fast fashion retailers are listening to consumer concerns about the sustainability of their operations. They are considering their triple bottom line, which not only considers the economic performance of their operations, but also the social and environmental impacts. A study by Arrigo analyzed the annual reports of 3 fast fashion retailers to understand how global sourcing decisions have changed over time and if sustainability was a factor. The analysis shows that sustainability has indeed become a factor in the global sourcing decisions, and the companies are trying to make their operations more sustainable. Nevertheless, one must wonder whether it is at all possible for fast fashion to be sustainable. Benet et al. Have considered this question and suggest that it may only be possible with new technology and a change in consumers' behaviors. Do not lose faith. Sustainability goes hand in hand with many lifestyles. The Christian faith encourages a positive contribution to our environment in this temporary home. Many world faiths reach an agreement on environmental care. We must care for the earth. Our current trend of overconsumption and irresponsible dumping is leading to the destruction of the planet. To live out a faithful lifestyle, one must consciously care for the environment by being mindful of purchases. After education, it would be unchristian to purchase items of clothing that have been made through the exploitation of individuals in lower and middle income countries. It would be unchristian to carry out a greedy lifestyle that is proven to hurt the future generations. Christians believe that God has given them husbandry over the earth and its resources. Some have incorrectly taken this as permission to exploit resources. Human beings are created alongside the crops and animals and resources. All are interdependent, but human beings are given a special role of care over creation. This care includes security and justice to live in relation with God and creation. This role arises from being made in God's image, which is wrongly associated with dictatorship. The Bible states otherwise. God's nature is wise, compassionate, and protecting. The role of steward or head gardener is what is meant by having dominion over the earth. We are to preserve the earth for ourselves and generations to come. Caring for the natural world is interwoven with the command to love others as God has first loved us. As Brett Calther argues, in this shared space we call Earth, ethics are crucial to ensuring consumerism does not erode our moral responsibility to others in the environment. What will we wear in the future? Although the designs and styles of the future are unknown, it is widely recognized that there should be changes to the fashion industry of the future. Government and industry must furnish and enforce policies to slow down the damage of the fashion industry. Consumers need to be educated to stir up their environmental consciousness. The term fast fashion connotes speed and overproduction of garments, but it also encompasses negative impacts on workers and the environment. Research is needed into the health effects of each stage of fashion production, especially in low and middle income countries. This research can then result in policy and practice changes to create long-term sustainable production and consumption of clothing. Much work needs to be done to educate and promote slow fashion to the masses. Both manufacturers and consumers must value the durability of clothing and appreciate that higher quality clothing takes more time to make. All aspects of clothing production, designing, sourcing, and manufacturing must be environmentally and socially sustainable. Consumers are also responsible for making fashion more sustainable, as opposed to waiting for the industry to solve the problems that consumers have helped to create. Everyone should be aware of how their purchases affect the environment, locally and globally. It is necessary to take a stand and choose the type of tomorrow we want to have with what we wear today. Every purchase is a choice. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this fantastic article. There is a figure and a table, I believe, so just going over that now. Figure 1, caption graphic of the amount of clothing being sent to landfills annually in the United States. So 1.7 million tons every year, which is 36 kilograms per person, ends up in landfill. Scrolling down a little bit to our table 1. So sustainable fashion, what it looks like. So the factors include source of materials. What it looks like to be sustainable, it would be local. Values, producing clothes with the planet, workers, and future generations in mind. Ecosystem preservation, reduction of carbon emissions, good working conditions, workers are in safe, structurally sound environments, reasonable hours and wages, regular full-time work week, for example, 40 hours per week, and fair wages.